says here, the administration consequently entered office facing twin $1 trillion deficits. Okay, the first was the gap between what the economy could be producing, right? Again, we have a bunch of factories, we have a bunch of farms in this country, we have office buildings, right? We have, in fact, not very far from here, a empty department store where there used to be a Mervyn's. That's unused capacity in the economy. And there's a cost to the fact that that's empty, right? When that was a thriving business, that business was paying taxes. It employed people who paid taxes. They had money. They were spending it other places, not just at Mervyn's. That kind of helped the economy run. So there was $1 trillion in capacity that was unused at the time of the inauguration. The other $1 trillion they're talking about is the $1.3 trillion we spent last year in excess of taxes collected. And again, that $1.3 trillion has to come from somewhere, and guess where it comes from? It comes mostly from borrowing. It does not come mostly from printing or, we actually don't necessarily print money in this country anymore. Now we just kind of, create an electronic, oh, go lend this money to somebody else kind of a thing. But the first thing I put in the packet beyond that listing of the management and budget page is the entire section for the Department of Education. There are no two ways about it. Education builds the future. The education that you have in your country determines your economic future. This can be seen over and over again in country after country, in places where the education system is good and people are getting well educated, economies flourish. In places where there is a lack of education, economies suffer. If we look at our own history, shortly after World War II, we created the GI Bill, which sent hundreds of thousands of young men who were coming home from the war, not back into the job pool directly, but sent them to school first, meaning that some of them could get better paying jobs, and some of them deferred going back into the workforce, as opposed to everyone being discharged and being in the workforce all at one time. Created the largest economic boom in the history of the country. Again, it cannot be argued that the boom was due to anything other than the fact that we had gone from a society where a high school education, whether or not with a graduation from high school, was the norm, to one that began to have a norm that was a college education. It meant we had more managers, it meant we had more engineers, it meant we had more scientists. The other huge thing of the 50s, other than the GI Bill, which sent so many people to college and created a boom, particularly in this state, in terms of building colleges. I went to one where we call ourselves the 49ers because the school opened in 1949. Yes. Guess what? Again, the reason for that would be the GI Bill. This was money spent on education. Now, again, I gave you all 6 pages here just to see what a full one of these synopses looks like, as opposed to what. And if we look at pages 67 and 68, which have the actual numbers here, and we can see, that at some point here, we get down to, there's a discretionary budget authority on a line with a 3, and that shows a little more than 46 billion. We also show the budgetary authority from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and that's the actual congressional name for the stimulus package. I don't know if any of you who've seen recently, but both on the 101 and on the 118, these signs are popping up that say, paid for by the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Well, guess what? Point this out to people as they're driving around. Yeah, you know, recovery funds have come here. Now, again, I think we should be paying for the highways not on an emergency basis, but on a regular basis. But that's my thought. And again, I'm here talking to you tonight to stimulate discussion amongst ourselves and amongst our community about these things, because that's the politics we need to have. We really don't need to have a politics of don't ask, don't tell. We really don't need to have a politics about who can be married. Equal means equal. You know, it doesn't mean, oh, you can have something that's statutorily equal. Wrong. Equal is equal. But that should not be where the discussion is. The discussion needs to be about this sort of meat and potatoes. So if we look at this, I think we can see that overall there's outlays for education from the federal government, and understandably there are also state and local disbursements which add to this, but which total about $100 billion. The defense budget is $550 billion. What does this tell you about our priorities?
Slightly inverted.
What?
Slightly upside down.
So.
That's the part of the budget we know about. We
Well,
don't, like CIA is not in here. NSA is not.
Correct. Anyhow, but if we talk about discretionary budget and the discretionary budget alone, Department of Defense gets about 50 cents out of every dollar in the discretionary budget currently. And if you look at the page, because I did put a page, the front page of that in here, that once again, they got an increase. Now, you will also notice, right, it says it's here, it's a 3.4% increase for 2011 over the 2010 level. Then almost every page here shows increased funding from a prior year. And that is fairly normal as to how governments interact. The cost of things does tend to increase over time. And B, every manager wants every dollar they can get their hands on. So now, I have here another point on my outline that I wanted to talk about, which says, is the economy stupid? Because it is. Again, 15 to 20% of our economic activity comes in this country every single year is federal spending. That's huge. Now, why did we have to bail out the Wall Street and those banks in late 2008 and in 2009? Well, it goes right back to when I talked about the funding and the borrowing. Fact of the matter is, federal government couldn't sell bonds if they didn't have someone to sell them. That's one of the things Wall Street does. So of course we needed to do that. Did we do it in the right way? Probably not. We probably could have helped them in a way that would have helped Those of us who were individuals, better. But we didn't.